Hi everyone, this is William from the Headphone Experience, and I'm here tonight with part 2 of my review of the Erzetich Mania. The Mania is made in Slovenia. It currently sells for 1,199 euros, which works out at the current exchange rate to $1,318 in US currency. But it can be purchased in the United States through onsongaudio.com for $12.50 right now. They are an authorized Erzetich dealer in the United States. This is a semi-open design. It's 80 ohms of impedance, and it has a 50 millimeter dynamic driver made of titanium. These weigh in, well, according to Erzetich, these weigh 460 grams. According to my kitchen scale, they're 475 grams, so a little bit of a difference there, but not enough to really make a big difference. The ear cups are made of linden wood, which comes from Slovenia. It's not just a veneer, it's a solid piece of wood. The ear pads are very thick, very soft, very cushy, and they're made of a synthetic leather. Erzetich has chosen to not use real leather in their pads. The cable that comes with these is about 2 meters long. Pretty nice cable. Has a thick covering on it. Comes standard with a 1/4 inch or 6.3 millimeter plug at the amp end, and at the headphone end it has 4-pin mini XLR connections. The ear pads, like I said, very thick, very cushy. The adjustment for the height of the ear cups is done with this knob here. You can slide it up and down. Then it also rotates this way, and it rotates up and down. And in my opinion, these are very comfortable. They don't feel heavy to me, and I just really like the way they feel. There's not much clamping force on them. Basically, the headband is just holding them up, and so they're not squeezing your head at all. And I did want to point out that there's no front or back on these. The connection for the cable is in the center. It's not angled forward, and there's really no difference. The ear pads aren't tapered. So what they did is one of the connections here, the right, is marked with a little red sleeve, so when these are connected to the headphones, which you can do either way, then you can keep track of which is your right channel with the red sleeve. Anyway, first video, I showed you the headphone, talked about the sound a little bit, but I want to dig a little deeper into the sound tonight. That's why the second video. And first thing I would say about this headphone, the first thing that really jumps out at me is it's a warm sound. It's definitely warm, on the warm side of neutral, but it's not dark. There's quite a bit of sparkle in the treble, so I'll kind of dig into that a little bit. First of all, I would say that the tone balance is a bit V-shaped. It's not really neutral. I would say the bass is emphasized a little bit, and the treble is emphasized a little bit. And I would say the points of emphasis are the bass is up into the mid bass is where it hits pretty hard. I would say around 80 hertz would probably be the center of the peak in the mid bass, and then in the sort of lower mid treble about 6,000 hertz, which really makes cymbals really jump out and sparkle a lot. So yeah, I would say a bit of a V-shaped, not really neutral. And then the tone balance, I would say rolls off a bit, probably starting about 8,000 hertz. So they've got a lot of sparkle and a lot of very clear, very detailed in the like cymbal range and all that, but they do roll off a little bit in the higher frequencies, probably above 8,000 hertz. The bass is strong, it's tight, it's not boomy, it's not muddy. I really like the bass on these headphones. Just not bloated, not overdone, but definitely an emphasis in the bass, and you know, just at a really enjoyable level. The mid-range I would describe as very smooth, very creamy, very lush. Really, really like the mid-range on these headphones. It's among the best I've heard. And, you know, like I said, it's on the warm side of neutral, but it doesn't lose any detail. It doesn't give up any at all. The treble, like I was saying, there's a bit of a peak at about 6,000 hertz, and cymbals really jump out. Anything in that frequency range just kind of jumps out. So they definitely do not sound dark at all to me. But like I said, there's a little bit of roll off up at probably above 8,000 hertz. It sounds like little tiny bells, little tings and dings and all that sound a little bit distant to me. The treble is very present, very, I mean, it's not set back at all, but yet it never sounds harsh to me at all. In fact, I have never heard anything that remotely sounds harsh out of this headphone. This headphone is the opposite of harsh. This is just a very smooth, creamy sound, and I get just kind of laid back a little bit, but really, I really enjoy this headphone. I do like it a lot. The extension and the frequencies, it's good on the bottom end. It does go quite deep into the sub bass. I actually did find a frequency measurement chart on these, and according to, I forgot where it was at, or I would tell you, but it showed a little bit of roll off in the sub bass of these, but I'm not hearing that at all. I've tried these on several different songs that have good sub bass, and I don't notice any roll off at all in the sub bass. The sub bass is very good in my opinion on these, and very solid mid bass. At the top end, like I said, a little bit of roll off up in the mid upper treble. Not, you know, not to the point of it being gone. It's just set back a little bit. I would say the detail and clarity are both excellent on this headphone. It's not analytical, you know, it's not, you know, to the point where it's going to, you know, point out every flaw in a recording. It's actually just about right in my opinion. It has very good detail, but yet you can listen to recordings that are less than perfect with this headphone. In fact, this headphone works with just about everything I tried it with. I never found anything that really sounded bad, and like I said, never gets harsh at all in any part of the frequency range. The imaging and separation, I would say, is very good. The separation between the instruments, they don't seem to blend together at all. You know, I mean, they don't blur together, but everything has its own location, so I'm happy with the imaging. The Soundstage is actually quite good. These are, according to Erzetich, this is a semi-open design, but they do have a very large grill on them, and they sound pretty open to me. And I would say the Soundstage in width is at least average and compared to other open back headphones. And I would say the height of the Soundstage is actually above average, quite good. I'm hearing sounds up over my head, kind of wrapping around my forehead. A lot of sounds up there, a lot of instruments, and So there's quite a bit of height to the Soundstage, and it actually has pretty good depth also. But I would say above average depth, where I'm hearing things that sound quite a bit out in front of me. Basically, the sound of this headphone, I would just say that this is one of the smoothest, least fatiguing headphones I have ever heard. I mean, I could listen to this for hours and my ears never feel worn out. It's just so smooth and creamy. What else? I was gonna talk about amps. I've tried this with about 4 different amps, and it sounds very good with a neutral solid state amp, and still has that V shape. It has a strong bass, little bit of peak in the treble, but on a tube amp, especially the Felix Audio Echo, it really brings out this headphone. It gives it just a little bit more warmth, and it gives it a bit of a kick in the sub bass, and this really sounds good with the Echo. And this isn't the first headphone that I actually thought sounded better with the Echo than with any of my solid state amps. So very nice amp and works very well with this headphone. I thought I would compare this to a couple of the other headphones I have on hand right now. I would say of any headphone I've heard, the one closest to the sound of this, and it's been one of my favorite headphones for a long time, and that would be the Kenton Valley. Kenton Valley has a similar V-shaped tone balance, and it's a little on the warm side of neutral, and actually, in my opinion, they sound very similar. They're not the same. There are some differences, and I'm thinking about maybe doing an actual comparison video of the Kenton Valley and the Erzetich Mania. So I might put that out in a couple days before I have to send these back. But the Valley, I would say, has a little more kick in the mid-range, or the mid-bass. The mid-bass has a little bit more punch, a little more weight behind it in the Valley than this. But I would say this has a little bit more of a peak in the treble than the Valley does. Things like cymbals and all that, or they stand out more. They're a little more detailed, more noticeable with this headphone. Other than that, though, they both have very creamy, rich mid-ranges, and they both have, I mean, in my opinion, the Valley has the best overall bass of any headphone I've heard so far. Not the most bass necessarily, well, definitely not the most, but the highest quality bass. The Valley just has, in my opinion, just about perfect bass, where it hits hard, but it's very tight, very clean, and I would say this probably comes in second, a very close second behind the Valley in the bass department. I really like the bass in this headphone. Makes things like the Hi-Fi Man Sundara, which I would consider a very neutral headphone, sounds very thin and kind of boring compared to this headphone. The bass of this just walks all over the Sundara. I was going to compare it to the Hi-Fi Man Aria, and I don't have the Aria here now. A friend of mine has it, and so I can't compare them directly. But from what I remember of the Aria, it just had a very smooth, very pleasant sound to it. And this reminds me of that in that respect. Like I said, just very smooth. This is just the opposite of a fatiguing headphone. Never, ever gets harsh and never causes me any ear fatigue at all. I was going to compare it to the Kenton Magni, which is another headphone I really like. And I would say the Magni is more on the neutral side, but the Magni has a very rich, thick, creamy mid-range. female vocals sound beautiful in the Magni, and I would say that the Magni and this are very close in sound in the mid-range. They both just make female vocals sound outstanding. And so in that respect, I'd say they're very similar. The Magni has more of a flat tone balance. This has more punch in the mid bass, and this has a little more sparkle in the 6,000 hertz range. But the Magni, I think, goes a little deeper into the sub bass, and the Magni goes a little higher into the treble. The treble extension is a little isn't rolled off the way it is with this one. But otherwise, and like I said, the Magni is another headphone I really like, and this sounds similar through most of the mid-range, very similar. So this basically would be sort of a V-shaped Magni with a little bit of boost in the mid bass and a little bit of boost in the lower mid treble. And this also has a little bit bigger soundstage than the Magni, because this is semi-open and the Magni is a closed back, so you do get a little bit bigger soundstage with this. As far as music, and a while back on my headphone group, the Headphone Experience, we had sort of a discussion about how some reviewers don't talk about what kind of music they listen to. And I've come to realize that that's kind of important, because without knowing what music I listen to, you really don't, my opinion really doesn't mean that much. So a couple of weeks or a couple months ago, I was doing some videos. I was talking more about the music, but my videos were getting too long, so that's something I kind of cut out. But I want to touch in a little bit on that. So some of the music I've listened to in the last week, I put a lot of time in on these in the last week. I've listened to them probably pretty much every day. So I just thought I'd show you a few of the things I've listened to this week and give you my opinion. Fleetwood Mac, greatest hits. In my opinion, Fleetwood Mac, and I love Fleetwood Mac, but in my opinion, with a neutral headphone, it sounds, most of what Fleetwood Mac has recorded sounds a little bit thin and a little bit boring with a neutral headphone. So I actually like a headphone that's got a little bit of emphasis in the bass, and it just gives more weight to the music and sounds better. And to tell you the truth, I've never heard Fleetwood Mac sound better than with this headphone. Sounds excellent with the Magni, sounds excellent with the Kenton Valley, but also just as good with this headphone. Norah Jones, this would be The Fall. There's a song on this called Back to Manhattan that's got some very deep sub bass, and this headphone does an excellent job with that. Telling me once again that this does go pretty deep into the sub bass, even though I saw a chart that showed quite a bit of roll off, but it's just not what I'm hearing. I'm hearing the sub bass out of this. No Doubt, Rock Steady, the song Underneath It All. Another song with very deep sub bass, and once again, this headphone does an excellent job with that. And Gwen Stefani's voice just sounds incredible through this headphone. Another song that's one of my favorites for testing headphones in several different ways. This is Depeche Mode. It's a World in My Eyes EP, and it has several different versions of the song World in My Eyes. Anyway, the World in My Eyes oil tank mix, which is track 2 on this, super deep sub bass, and just about every frequency in the entire range is covered in this song. It's also got some crazy soundstage in it, just stuff all over the place, zipping back and forth, going out really wide and all that. And this song, though, with a neutral headphone, sounds a little boring, and this headphone really brings it to life. It gets that sub bass, it gets down deep, you know, hits hard, and really enjoy that. Something I forgot to mention, comparing the Valley to the Kenton Valley to this headphone. The Kenton Valley, like I said, it has a little more emphasis in the mid bass. It does hit a little harder. And also the Valley is definitely more dynamic than this headphone. The Valley is a very dynamic headphone. It has a lot of punch all the way through the frequency range, where the Erzetich is more, it's a smoother, more mellow, easier to listen to sound, you know, so the Valley definitely has more a more dynamic sound, but that's not always my first choice, you know. I mean, sometimes I don't want to be beat to death by the music, you know. Sometimes I just want a little more laid back, a little more easygoing, and, you know, in that case, this is just a really nice headphone for that. It's just very pleasant to listen to. Tori Amos, this is Little Earthquakes, and this is the one song that I did notice some roll off in the treble. Track number 3, Silent All These Years. I think it's about, where does it come in? I think about 43 seconds into the song. There's just this little, it's kind of in the background, it's just a little ting, a real high-pitched ting. And with headphones that I would consider neutral, like say the Hi-Fi Man Sundara, that ting is pretty present. And in the Valley, it's a little set back, but I can, you know, still hear it pretty good. The Magnia the same way. With this headphone, I'm struggling to hear it. That light little ting in the background, that I don't know where that's at. I'm guessing maybe at about 10,000 hertz. I'm struggling a bit to hear it. It's there, but it's very distant. So that's where I form my opinion that the treble does roll off a little bit. Sarah McLachlan, Stumbling Towards Ecstasy, track 8, Ice. Very deep sub bass, and then some real punchy bass with a lot of impact, and this headphone once again hits that sub bass real well. Doesn't have the impact of the Valley, but also doesn't wear you out as much. So like I said, I definitely think I'm going to go ahead and do a comparison video, you know, and compare the Valley and this headphone all the way through, because I do like them both very much. Duran Duran, Rio, the song The Chauffeur. It's got some pretty deep bass in it. You don't always notice it. If you don't have a headphone that goes deep, you won't notice the deep bass. But it's there, and this headphone does find it and does reveal it. 9 Inch Nails, Pretty Hate Machine. You know, some pretty hard electronic music, a lot of deep bass, a lot of, you know, percussion and all that. Headphone is one of the best I've heard at making this sound good. Linkin Park, what is this, Hybrid Theory. Another, you know, electronic, but pretty hard hitting. And once again, I would say the Valley and this headphone work the best with this. You know, I've also tried it with, you know, some classic rock, things like that. And to be honest, the Valley from Kenton has been my #1 favorite headphone for listening to rock and electronic music for like the last year. And this is the first headphone that's come along that's given it some pretty tough competition. You know, to be honest, sometimes this sounds better, sometimes the Valley sounds better, and I'll get into that in another video. But for a long time, my favorite headphone for rock and electronic has been the Kenton Valley, and this does give it some pretty good competition in that respect. Is there anything I don't like about this headphone? I would say the only things I can think of is a little bit of roll off in the high treble, and sometimes it lacks a little bit of dynamics, but the trade-off is a nice, smooth, non-fatiguing sound, so that's not always bad, you know. So I mean, sometimes I would like it to be a little bit more dynamic, but a lot of the time, I mean, like when I was listening to Fleetwood Mac, it just sounded perfect. You know, I've never heard it sound better out of another headphone. Things that I do like, I like the smoothness, I like the warmth, I like the bassy, you know, that extra little punch in the bass. Very clear, very detailed, and a really good soundstage, a really good balance between width, height, and depth. So, do I recommend this headphone? Yes, very much. In fact, I've got to send this back in a few days, and I'm, you know, gonna miss it. I really enjoy listening to this headphone. So before I send this back, I'm gonna try to do a quick comparison between this and the Valley, and also I have the big brother of this, the Erzetich Phobos, and I did a first impressions on that also, and I'm going to try to get a part 2 to that video out too in the next few days before they go back. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, and once again, this is William from the Headphone Experience, and thank you for watching my video. If it helped you at all in your decision, please give me a thumbs up, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you're all welcome to join us over at the Headphone Experience on Facebook. Thank you.